Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're set to deliberate the latest developments, particularly vis-a-vis the Gaza Strip, Syria, Lebanon, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and more topics of interest, it's always important to remember that today marks day 510 since the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip launched their surprise and heinous onslaught of October 7th of 2023. And with that, let's now turn to our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, two issues that I'd like to initially start with. First and foremost, the situation of the Gaza Strip. There was a commission of inquiry by the IDF that was released yesterday, actually unveiled yesterday to the security establishment, to the government, and other people of interest, including the families related to the atrocities that were committed against them on October 7th. In the next couple of days, this will be also unveiled to the public. What can you tell us about that briefly? And we are, of course, just before the end of phase one of the Gaza ceasefire outline. And what can we note about this at this stage? Is it too early to know whether or not we're moving to phase two?
Yes, so the after action review, it is a bit less than a commission of inquiry, but nevertheless, the IDF has undertaken a series of after action reviews regarding the performance or non-performance in this case of the military on October the 7th in various settlements, kibbutzim, and outposts along the Gaza border on October the 7th. And while there are no exciting revelations, nevertheless, the picture is very bleak, and the heroic efforts by members of the kibbutzim who served as an emergency force, they tried to hold the fort against hundreds of terrorists, sometimes just a dozen or so armed youth, and they mostly fell in the line of duty, and only then did the IDF get in. This is still a matter of grave concern to Israel. It still has to be looked into, along with, of course, the responsibility of the political echelon above the military and the intelligence community. Now, as for the other issue you mentioned, there is a bit of a contradiction between the wishes of the Israeli government and those of Hamas. Hamas would like to have the end of the process announced already, even if the implementation takes some more time. The Netanyahu government would not like to announce right now that the second phase will end with a declaration that the war is over. And the Trump administration is trying to bridge this gap. The way to do it is to try and slice the pastrama a bit thinner by virtue of Hamas releasing more hostages. They still have more than 20 hostages alive, and more than that who are already dead. And they can spare a few more hostages every week so that Israel will progress in its part of withdrawing from the Philadelphia route and releasing Palestinian prisoners. The presidential envoy, Steve Witkoff, is about to visit the region early next week. Hopefully, he will come up with a formula.
Thank you, Mr. Oren. Let's now turn to Madrid, Spain, where we're joined by Dr. Rafael Bardaghi, formerly Spain's national security advisor, currently the CEO of Worldwide Strategy. It's great to see you, Rafael.
My pleasure to be here.
The pleasure is always ours. I'd like to immediately ask you particularly about the situation vis-a-vis the Gaza Strip. Where are we to focus on strategically, and how should Israel act within the current dynamics?
Well, I think we all need to understand the value of life and to recover even the bodies from the Jewish culture perspective. But having said that, I think one of the goals, if I remember well, of the war was to eliminate Hamas not only militarily and as a threat to the state of Israel, but as a governing entity. And this has not been achieved yet. So from the distance, which is always easy to look at in the situation, I would say that I would favor an end to the process in which Israel can recover all of the hostages alive, but it still is engaged in providing a future of Gaza where Hamas is not the controlling and the governing entity. I think Hamas has very clear defined objectives: the disappearance of Israel and the Jewish people from the river to the sea. And that is not going to be changed along the process if we start a second, third, or fourth phase or whatever. It will take years to rebuild the capacity, but they are there and they are willing to try to do everything again in the future, from 50 years now or whatever. And that's now the window of opportunity to really eliminate Hamas from the picture. I know that in the last 15 months, there have been disagreements among the government, among the security establishment in Israel, whether it's better to have a diminished Hamas in power than not Hamas at all, or bringing back the Palestinian Authority, or creating a chaotic situation in the future. But I think with the Trump administration now in the White House, we should look for more creative options in which Hamas has no place and no role to play in the future.
Absolutely. Well, also joining the conversation is Oded Eilam. Mr. Eilam formerly served as the head of the Counterterrorism Center at the Mossad Intelligence Agency. It's great to have you with us, sir. I'd like to immediately focus on the same theater, the Gaza Strip, from a counterterrorism perspective, from a necessity and a war objective of seeking to not only, as Dr. Bardahi mentioned, eradicating the Islamist Hamas from a military perspective, but also from a governing perspective. How can the two be accommodating to one another and at the same time seeking to extract the hostages, be they among the living or not?
The answer is, of course, is a complicated one, and there's no definite answer for that. But I just want to say one thing to make it very clear. Hamas does not want to govern Gaza. It does not want to govern Gaza. It does not want to take care of the garbage and the sewer and all the necessity and the police. It's not their perspective. It's not their goal. They are trying to actually cut and paste what's happening in Lebanon with Hezbollah, which means that Hezbollah is not the ruler of Lebanon, but in a way dictates everything, either politically and of course military. And how do I know that? Simply because in 2017, they signed an agreement with Dahlan in Cairo stating exactly that. So right now we are facing a situation where the Hamas is actually willing to submit its, and I would say it's a legitimate front to the Palestinian Authority or any entity that will go into Gaza, as long as they maintain their ammunition, their weaponry, their force, the power, and of course, their political stance, which is the Muslim Brotherhood as a party. And this thing doesn't come along with the objectives of Israel. Another thing that we are facing a crucial issue is, of course, the hostages. The Hamas does not, I would say, Hamas realize that the hostages are playing cards in the game. And in fact, it's the most valuable playing cards in the game. And so their objective is to maintain as much as possible and prolong the second phase until they are absolutely certain that Israel accept their terms. And here we have a major problem. How to face it? It's another story.
Absolutely. Well, let's shift gears to the northern front, particularly Lebanon, where the parliament announced the ratification of the government of Nawaf Salam. Mr. Oren, what can you tell us about that?
So there are positive indicators. The Lebanese are no longer afraid of Hezbollah and of Iran, the mentor and sponsor of Hezbollah. And we have heard some senior voices saying we are tired of fighting other people's wars. It remains to be seen whether the American assistance to the new government, the presidential office headed by General Joseph Aoun, who until several months ago was the commanding general of the armed forces. He is quite known to the CENTCOM commander, Michael Eric Kurilla, and to other American officials, as well as Mr. Salam, whom you mentioned, and Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri, who is the Amal leader, not Hezbollah. Again, we have to see what happens in South Lebanon, and the Israeli policy right now, as announced by Netanyahu and Defense Minister Katz, but also as can be seen in the field itself, is forward deployment and preemptive fire or rules of engagement. Israel is not withdrawing from the entire area, neither in Syria, which borders Lebanon, nor in Lebanon. And wherever there are hostile movements, efforts by either the Syrian government forces or pro-Iranian militias to get closer to the Golan Heights border or the Israeli border with Lebanon in the Galilee, Israel fires first and asks questions later.
And so it should be. Dr. Bardahi, from a strategic perspective, naturally, as Mr. Owen mentioned, President Joseph Aoun is not only known by his American counterparts or French counterparts or others, but he's also liked by them. The Lebanese army is regarded as a Maronite institution. Unfortunately, it is penetrated by rogue elements, or not necessarily rogue, but rather elements with affiliations to some of the terror organizations that are proactively fighting against Israel in one way or another. And therefore, how can Israel expect in the medium to long term to see the Lebanese army taking over its responsibilities under the ceasefire outlines that include ensuring that Hezbollah does not rearm or rehabilitate its infrastructure south of the Litani River or across the entirety of Lebanon for that matter?
Well, I think it's a very simple equation. I wish the Lebanese armed forces are able and willing to take this task for the first time in history, to disarm Hezbollah. But I think it will be naive to plan to do a forced posture in which we take that for granted. So I think the prudent strategy and approach from Israel will be, okay, yes, let's give them a chance, but we are not totally abandon a buffer zone in the south of Lebanon, and we will, as Amir said, preemptively fire if we consider a threat coming near our border. I think that's a sound strategy, and if you don't escalate, it will give the new Lebanese government a chance to establish itself as a central power against Hezbollah. But if not, you are guaranteed your own security on your border. So I think that's the prudent approach for the time being, and then we will see. It's a very fluid situation, as in Syria, no?
Absolutely. Mr. Elam, I'd like to hear your take on this, particularly after the remarks made by Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz in remarks, of course, to the Regional Council conference that is currently taking place in Israel. He highlighted that the 5 military installations that were erected in Lebanon, which accommodate other defensive measures on the Israeli side of the border, will remain indefinitely until reality changes on the field. What are those changes that we should expect?
First of all, I want to absolutely agree with Amir and Raphael regarding the Lebanese army. We have to understand what is the Lebanese army. The Lebanese army is an army of beggars. It's very poor equipped, and morale is very low. And let's not forget, every Shiite family that has 4 sons, 2 goes to the Lebanese army and 2 goes to the Hezbollah. And so we see an echelon of warriors that are mainly Shiite or Sunnite, while the higher echelon, the officers, are Christian or Maronite and others. So we have to be very realistic when we approach the capability, and I'm talking about the current capability of the Lebanese army to confront the Hezbollah. Having said that, we are seeing some scenes we have never anticipated and never seen before of deployment of this army on a scale that gives some sort of optimism to what is happening, but we'll have to see where it goes from there. And of course, the Lebanese army will have to undergo major reforms in order to be a real practical adversary to the Hezbollah. Having said that, of course, Israel has to be on the vigilant. We have to be very careful in the way that we can conduct the situation right now, taking into consideration the Hezbollah does not want to re-enter in a new phase of war after suffering such a major blow. And so the ability of Israel to control the situation is dependent much on our intelligence and, of course, using aggressive force when needed.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Owen, I'd like to cross the border into Syria and in that same breath highlight that since Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz unveiled Israel's new policy or new strategy vis-a-vis Syria, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham interim government in Damascus decided to test Israel's resolve, transiting both tanks and other heavy munitions into the demilitarized or designated demilitarized zone, which Israel established within that sector, and tried to arm the so-called second platoon in the new Syrian army, destroying basically everything that they sought to divert southwards. And there was seeming frustration in both in Damascus and elsewhere in Syria about this fact, considering, of course, the Turkish angle, the aspirations of Mohammed al-Julani to revitalize his image within the international community that then would bring an influx of support to also strengthen his own forces, which are close to nothing.
So you mentioned several issues which are tangential to each other. And while you say that the new regime tried to test Israel, one wonders whether there is such a centralized chain of command with orders going down from Damascus to the front. Perhaps, but it may also turn out to be the case that these are the initiatives of local commanders. But in any event, the Israeli response was swift and substantial, and apparently Damascus is going to go back to focus on its internal struggles. it must first stabilize the government, try to rule over the entire country. You rightly mentioned the Turkish angle. We have heard earlier today a surprising call from the top of the PKK regarding a possible truce or even peace feelers between the Kurdish underground and the Turkish government. If that happens, if Turkey doesn't have such a concern now with Kurdish elements south of its borders in Syria, it will also have quite an impact on the Syrian-Israeli relationship. And both Netanyahu and Defense Minister Katz mentioned the Israeli alliance with the Druze community in Syria, and also, of course, the Druze communities in Syria on the Golan Heights, which was taken from Syria in 1967. But of course, there are still roots there in Syria for the Druze communities and the Druze communities in Israel. Now, in his speech earlier this week, specifically mentioned the counties of Quneitra, Dera, and Sueda in southwestern Syria as having special importance to Israel. This is a very pointed message, which surely the Damascus authorities are not going to miss.
Indeed. Well, we don't have very much time left, and I still want to hear the Iranian angle to this current equation. But Dr. Bardahi, to set things a little bit in a broad sense, if I may, strategically on the Syrian file, are the current moves by Israel, Turkey, and the other actors basically seeking to set the stage ahead of President Trump sweeping in and then starting to negotiate from a certain point on each front?
Well, I'm not sure that everything is tactical in our life, but anyway, what I don't know exactly is what Syria is today. I think the situation is too fragmented, too open, and I don't know what will be in some months to come. But I would say that Israel has a good card there, which is at the Druze community, and I think it's very important for Israel to take care of the Druze minority in Syria and to play a role in their future, no? And that will determine also the configuration of the country. But secondly, I think it's probably more relevant today that just speculating about the future in Syria is the certain knowledge we have that Iran is enriching 60% military-grade uranium at a faster pace, and they are enriching in a path that they can have enough material to build a bomb in a month if they decided to do so. No? So I think that's the real challenge in the coming months, and I think that's something where Israel can play a determinant role for securing the future of the region and the world, actually. You know?
Absolutely. Well, we heard plenty of rhetoric coming out of Iran in the past 72 hours, also following the meeting between Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. And on that, Mr. Elam, to what degree is Israel resolved when we're talking about frustrating Iran's nuclear program? And is that only on a kinetic timeline, or are we also talking about giving the American maximum pressure campaign a chance?
I think that we have actually no alternative right now. I think we missed, in a way, the opportunity to strike. And as the way I see the Trump stand and the Trump's concept and about Iran is trying to reach another sort of a deal under completely different terms with Iran, and probably including inside the deal elements that were excluded before, like supporting terrorist proxies and so on. The thing is that the way to bring the Iranians to the table on the Western terms should be applied with the threat, with a real threat of using force. And right now, I'm a little bit pessimistic regarding I would say, the motivation of the Trump administration to waive this sort of threat in order to force the Iranians into the negotiating table. I'm not sure this is the rhetoric now. I'm hearing the rhetoric of Khamenei. It has a little bit changed from August to now. Is more, I would say, aggressive and more, I would say, reluctant in a way that he expresses Iran desire right now. I think the way to do some sort of initiative on that matter is by talking softly and holding a big stick.
Dr. Bardahi, one sentence. Do you expect, however, the so-called threat to be perceived as credible by the Islamic Republic at this point in time?
Yes, I do. And that's why, if I were advising the Israeli Prime Minister, which I'm not, I would say to him, look, ask President Trump not to help you directly, just not to put pebbles in your shoes like the Biden administration, or not to mention Obama, did in the past. But Israel has to face the harsh reality that the clock is ticking, and Israel has to step up as a regional power, even a world power, in order to stop the nuclear ambitions of Iran, which are, as I said before, accelerating, not stopping. No?
Well, I just will mention that there are more strategic bombers in CENTCOM AOR than ever before. And we'll have to end the discussion here since we came out of, we ran out of time. I'd like to immediately thank Mr. Eilam, Dr. Bardahi, and Mr. Oren for all of your insights, and like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.